Okay, so yeah, one thing I found interesting about the music was basically how it stuck to the theme of the movie, keeping us like in the past and in the present at the same time, because I noticed they played like a lot of Marvin Gaye throughout it. And it was kind of used as a point to kind of talk about how things were at home for the Black soldiers and how they were being mistreated at home and in the field, because the woman who was doing the radio broadcasting would always play like, I don't know, I guess it was Marvin Gaye that she was playing. I don't know if that was the movie or if that
Yeah,
was
I
actually,
think
yeah, I think that was what was actually going on. So it kind of like showed that difference.
definitely. And I think like one thing like when you were talking about Marvin Gaye, that was really cool that I noticed in the movie was like a lot of the music they were using by him was off like his What's Going On album that was in like response to the Vietnam War. And so I thought it was interesting how they used like stripped down versions of the songs he had. Like I don't know if that was like just an artistic choice or maybe just like kind of mirroring like the kind of like skeletal almost versions of the like people like how they're old now and they're like living off these memories and trying to get gold and like their relationships are being reduced and how like the song was kind of and like the music was kind of stripped down or like really quiet in some areas and how like at even one part Paul was like singing the song while he was digging his own grave. Like I think that he really did kind of like include the music in a very like intentional way, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, and I just to go off of that, it's obvious and like especially in how we're learning about the Vietnam War and different responses to war in the Black community. Music was definitely a big part of that and a big coping mechanism for not only African Americans at the time, but the whole country was stricken by the war. So I think Spike Lee did a good job of articulating that through the film and also making it relatable for different um, eras watching the film. Um, like we obviously weren't around during that time, but we are aware of the psychological impact of musicians such as Marvin Gaye and people like that. So I think that was a good way to merge different art platforms within the film.
My last point regarding music, um, even when Paul, when he was about to be killed, and he started singing, I can't remember what song he was singing. I'm trying to find it, but he was singing this song, and it was almost like he gave this feeling that this is the end. Like he chose this. You know how you're saying he's gonna choose when he dies. He chose that this is his moment, even though he didn't really choose. Um, so I just thought that scene really stood out to me. A very interesting scene.
Yeah, definitely. Because, like, at that point, he had already kind of been forgiven. So he was ready to die. Like, I think that was kind of the best case scenario for him. Like, as sad as it was, like, he was finally, like, at peace.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and I think we can go on to the topic of the costumes.
I was just gonna say for the costumes, I looked up the costume designer who happened to be Donna Barwick, who worked previously a lot with Chadwick Boseman, but also Spike Lee in general in a lot of his um, movies. So that's a cool note, as well as the fact that she's worked on other war movies before. So it's cool that it was intentional choosing that designer and having someone who's pretty well versed in not only Black culture, but war culture as well.
And something that I noticed with clothing wise was the Make America Great Again hat that Paul was wearing throughout most of the gold searching scenes. And like towards the end, like after he died, you saw I think his name's DeRoche, the white man, he put the hat on. So it's kind of like symbolizing how like in America, like I don't want to say white people, but they're kind of like taking something that Black people were feeling like empowered about and like making it theirs, kind of like, I don't want to say stealing it, but the Make America Great Again hat definitely has like a negative connotation within like the Black community. So it was kind of like pretty interesting to see how the directors made it so that he would then wear the hat at the end when he's like trying to steal the gold from the veterans.
Yeah, I found it interesting too how Paul was wearing the Make America Great Again hat, and then his son wore a Morehouse shirt throughout the whole movie. So I feel like that kind of showed like the contrast and the disconnect between Paul and David, because throughout the story, it's kind of obvious that their relationship is strained and like they have a lot of conflict going on. So I thought the costume person really portrayed that in their clothing, as well as like the things they were saying and like how they acted towards each other.
Do you all feel like the costume, when there were like flashbacks, were accurate with the time and the era of the Vietnam War, or do you all think it was inaccurate? Did y'all make any notes on that?
I'm not sure if the clothing itself is accurate, but I liked how like when they were in the present day and they were like having a reunion, they were wearing like vacation clothes. And then when it got more serious, you'd see them in the war uniform. So you can see like the contrast of like, oh, this is the present, things are supposed to be like better, more fun, but then they flash back to the war and it's all like uniform.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Like, I didn't really think about it from that perspective with like the vacation situation. It's like an obvious point in the direction that like, you know, things are looking up for this community, and hopefully that's the case for a lot of, well, honestly, it's not the case for a lot of veterans, which I think is a good point that Spike Lee made. It's like a pretty positive display of events for these specific men in comparison to a lot of situations we know that have happened with veterans and the poverty that they're succumbed to oftentimes and the mental health issues that they're also faced with. So that's an interesting thing to note.
Yeah, I think that's like a really good point, like what both of you were saying, because like the way the movie just kept like change, like the just extreme emotions that were happening, like how it'd be like they're just laughing, having a good time, and they leave the restaurant and there's like the like poppers or whatever it was that sounded like gunshots on the ground. Like it just kept feeling like it would get better and then it would get like a lot worse. And it was just kind of like tracking their like the impact that this movie had had or not the movie, that the war had had on them, like even though they like it's been years, like the way that it still affects them. So yeah, and it's just like I don't know if this really counts, like I guess this more counts as like effects, but just like the blood, like in certain areas, like the way they like the specific areas that he chose to have them be like shot, like how when Otis was shot, like at the end, like it was right over his heart, and he had like his hand over his heart, and Make America Great Again had like on top of it as he's like sitting there as the camera's like spinning out. And like when Norman opens his shirt and there's like the blood like on his stomach, like I feel like he could have chosen to, like he was definitely like choosing those places like specifically, or that like setting kind of specifically, and I thought that that was like a, so I don't know if that's costume, but I thought it was a good work of like effect.
I think, I mean, I don't know where this one falls in, but when I don't remember who he was, but the one who got blown up. Um, it's almost like we went from the worst situation with Paul, and then it was easing off a little bit. It wasn't exact, kind of easing off actually, and then all of a sudden we were back in it. Like somebody had blown up. We got that whole view of his body, and we're back in the war scene, even though it wasn't a flashback. It wasn't that. It was literally happening right in front of our eyes. I thought that was very interesting, but I don't know where it falls. But yeah.
Okay, does anyone have any last thoughts before we close it out? No. Okay. Thank you guys for listening, and that's it.